podcast.
Here we go. Hello. Around the block. Where, Sammy?
And we're going around the world, Dobie.
That's what we do. This is where we discuss, debate, and deliberate all things diabetes. We're glad you're here. Representing type 2, my name is Dobie Maxwell. Representing type 1, you just heard her. She is vivacious, effervescent, and what else?
Sometimes in the know.
You're always in the know. Ms. Sammy Parker. We'll get to her in a second. First, today's episode of JMT is brought to you by the Diabetes app, a free social community app that does what, Sammy?
Brings together type 1 and type 2 diabetics and provides community resources.
You and I doing this podcast is a professional marriage. Anybody that does it in radio, it's the way it works. And today, we're going to go on our honeymoon.
We are going on the honeymoon.
Professional honeymoon.
Everybody's probably like, what the heck is
what's going on here? Called TMZ.
No, it's true. But yeah, the honeymoon period is a phase basically that people experience right after being diagnosed. And it's typically always like seen in type 1 diabetics, but it's very much common with type 2 as well, because it's just basically like you don't need as much insulin at the time when you're first diagnosed and your pancreas is still working. So it's like, what is it? The little train that could, you know?
Yeah, it's a little train that wants to, and it could for a while, but pretty soon, it's kind of like driving a car that's just on the last legs.
Yeah, and it's
pretty
like,
soon,
your pancreas is like, oh, I'm trying. And then all of a sudden it could be anywhere from like a month to, Zach, our intern, just said the little engine that could, exactly.
Way before 1990, Zach, but that's okay.
Your pancreas, like the beta cells are like, they could be working still up to like a year or even 3 years or even 5 years after someone first tells you you're diabetic. But it basically just means that your body's still producing some insulin until it completely shuts out. So with that being said, honeymoon phase, Dobie, for like example for me, basically when I was diagnosed, I caught it pretty early. So my pancreas was still like, I was on insulin, but my pancreas still would cover. So if I like messed up or forgot to take a dose, then my pancreas kind of like would recognize, oh, not a lot of insulin. I can kind of like work a little harder and maybe I can produce some still. So basically it's almost a better way of like managing blood sugars when you first get diagnosed.
And so your pancreas is trying to help you out, but there comes to a point where it just can't anymore.
Yeah, it's basically from like anywhere from the first month to 2 years. And it could be 5 years. I know people that it's like their pancreas is still working a little. It's just trying. It's the little engine that could. It's the little pancreas.
It's apocalypse.
Yeah,
it's just kind of walking there, zombie. Yeah, I'm working for 2 weeks, 5 years. That's weird because it's not uniform. You think, okay, like 2 week notice and then it poops out. It's easy, but no, it's not like that. It could linger.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and it happens in every single person. I don't think I've even talked to a diabetic that's been like it hasn't happened. And what's interesting is that the honeymoon phase. I've had a couple diabetics I've met that they're like, "Oh, that's so crazy. Your A1C was that, mine was 5.5." Like they one-upped me and I'm like, oh, when'd you get diagnosed? Like, just curious. And they're like, 3 months ago. Okay, you got me.
Bingo. I don't think a lot of people know about this, though. Until we talked about this before we did this episode, I wasn't familiar with this concept at all.
Yeah, and because type 2 isn't necessarily, like your cells aren't just dying, your beta cells aren't dying. It's just that your cells are having a tough time. Insulin is basically like not working and allowing the GLUT4 door to open for glucose to go into the cell. So for type 2, it's like your body's still producing insulin. It just doesn't know how to do it. And it's almost like a traffic jam. And it's like, and then that's why you become insulin resistant and have high blood sugars. So that's why people don't always talk about the honeymoon phase with type 2, because your beta cells aren't dying. Well, I mean, they eventually can get to that point depending individualistic needs, but that's not the main character trait of type 2. But I think it's still important because I feel like regardless what the actual definition of honeymoon phase is for type 1, I feel like type 2, there is a honeymoon phase. And it's kind of like that honeymoon phase is you first get diagnosed, and no matter what, the reason you get diagnosed is because you're having these symptoms. So it's the starting phases of the symptoms of having type 2. And in that, I feel like with type 2, the honeymoon phase period is kind of like, okay, well, apparently like my blood sugars are higher. I haven't been necessarily eating what I should be eating. I haven't been as active. And your body's like, if you treat it pretty well, right when you find out you have type 2, you could prevent it from getting worse and be able to flip it and reverse it and take care of yourself. But if you don't, then it's just going to continue to head south. So I feel like that honeymoon phase for a type 2, it's a complete different definition, but it's almost like okay, I have the option right now. What am I going to do? Honeymoon phase. Am I going to take it, tackle it? And since I'm still producing insulin, I haven't gone to the extreme where I'm completely insulin dependent, or am I going to neglect it completely and have to eventually, go on insulin, and then hopefully maybe I'll be able to reverse it. But it's an interesting concept.
It is an interesting concept. I'm glad we're talking about it. I have a full disclosure I need to make. And looking back on it, I can't believe this happened. I had a friend at the time, was a business partner, and his father was type 1 and was a doctor, a plastic surgeon. And he said, your diet is not good. I bet you're pre-diabetic. So one thing led to another. This is probably 4 or 5 years before I got diagnosed. And he pricked my finger and took blood, says, yeah, you're going towards pre-diabetic. I said, well, what do I do? Well, you have to eat better and you can probably turn in. And I didn't eat better. And sure enough, I got it. Bingo. Didn't expect it, but I got it. So
you nailed it. Pre-diabetes, I like to say, is like the honeymoon phase of a type 2.
It's a warning phase. It's a red flag.
Yes.
But the flag gets bigger. It's not the little one that you're carrying, in the seat. It's the one they run across after touchdowns, the big flag on the field, the big red flag that people don't even see. It's like, I'll be okay. You don't really do anything until the ship crashes on the shore.
We call it the honeymoon phase because it's like, it's like, especially for type 1, like, your body's still covered in you sometimes. Like you still have, but really it's like okay, this is the good part and just get ready because it's about to blow. It's about to get real.
Well, it's a friendly warning, but I think if we don't do anything about it and keep eating poorly and all those kind of things, look, the little pancreas that could, pretty much it couldn't after a while. It's only doing so much.
It's like shiz is about to hit the fan.
Ready to pop like a ketchup pack. I'm working. Bang, there's only so much you can do.
I should call it like diabiz for shiz.
Diabiz for shiz, the little...
like diabiz is about to hit the fan.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How was yours? You were still a kid, so I mean, your organs are still growing. You're at 12 years old. You're not fully mature yet.
Well, let me put it into perspective. My A1C, the first A1C I had was like, I'm really going to butcher this, but I'm pretty sure the first one I had was like 5.8 because I was in the honeymoon phase. And I was like, oh yeah, like I got this. And then people would be like, just beware, there's the honeymoon phase. And I'd be like, okay, geez, they're just trying to put like a damper on my parade. And then I realized, then my next A1C was like 6.8. And I was like, oh. And then it went up to 7.5. And I was like, oh. And then in high school, when I was really insulin resistant, it was like 8. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we are not in the honeymoon phase anymore.
The honeymoon is over, honey.
And I took care of it. That's the thing too. Like with A1C, people think like, oh, they have a bad A1C, they don't take care of it. I was on top of that crap so hard. I felt like I knew exactly what I was doing. I was finger pricking all the time, but I had a really tough time because dance, which we'll hopefully talk about in a future episode, but causes crazy blood sugars and hormones and insulin resistance. So it's like that honeymoon phase secured me during middle school. But then high school came and it was like, I got hit by a train. I was like, whoa, we are not on the honeymoon now.
Didn't that shock you though? I mean, hit by the train, that's got it. When you get up there around 8, it's like, wait a minute, I'm a good kid. I believe in God. I eat my vegetables. I'm exercising. Like I said, I would have just flipped my wig.
It was like I was staying at like a top hotel ever for like the first year or two of diabetes. And then it was like I just went to the nearest motel and like they told me there was no water in it. And I was like, well, and it hit me hard.
Yeah, it would hit me hard to hear it. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Did you talk to anybody else about it?
I did. But at the time, my endocrinologist, I switched over right away from Children's Hospital because I knew that I only was going to get 15 minutes with a doctor. So then I switched over to a private, basically like little boutique doctor, I guess you could say. I was like in a smaller office, which we just did not mesh well. Not each other's vibes, which if you go back to Dating Your Endo episode.
I was going to say, go back to our episode. You'll hear all about that. And if you don't, you're not alone.
Literally was not the vibe at all.
There was no honeymoon period.
No honeymoon. I was like, okay. Every time I went in, I was about to cry. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Diabetes complications are going to attack me. But with that, he would be like, he was just pretty straightforward about it. Like, well, your blood sugars, you're out of the honeymoon phase. So you need to start taking care of it now. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. So the honeymoon phase, though, it's real. Like everybody tells you. And I try to, every time now I meet a new diabetic, I tell them like, hey, heads up, you're going to have a honeymoon phase. So your blood sugars are going to be great. It's not going to be like a shock that all of a sudden it gets harder. Like that's what it's going to be. It's going to get harder. But I almost feel like I have to be that warning. I'm like the thing that's like,
what? How does it again? Okay, just want to make sure.
I'm pretty good at it, right?
You're the human sound effects machine. If somebody gets this and is listening and is in the honeymoon phase, does the bottom drop out? Is there a warning that we can offer them? Because it's hard enough just to get diagnosed, but then this is happening. So, well, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I don't have diabetes. My pancreas is still working. It's like, we want
Yeah,
to have false
well,
hope. We want hope, but not false hope.
the honeymoon phase varies. It ranges for anybody, and there's not really a hint as to like, hey, Dobie, you know what? Your honeymoon phase is going to be like 1 year. Like, nobody can tell you that. It's very like, you just have to wait to experience it.
The Diabetes app is an online community platform that was created to help people living with diabetes find support and information in one spot.
And on the Diabetes app, you can join groups and connect with other people all over the world who are also living with diabetes. I mean, for me, whenever I have a bad day, I find myself scrolling through the mental wellness group just to reassure myself that I'm not alone.
The Diabetes app has a resource section where you can find articles, recipes, tips, and tricks for managing your diabetes. Download the Diabetes app today and connect with us right on the app.
DietStrong is an online telehealth platform that connects you to medical and holistic professionals to help you manage your diabetes. Find registered dietitians, nutritionists, certified diabetes educators, and more without the hassle of having to go into a doctor's office.
Wait. You mean a lazy bum like me can have appointments right from my computer? Sign me up.
That's right, Dobie. And this week, our listeners can use promo code JMT25 for 25% off their first visit.
Yeah, don't try to cheat and go to JMT26 because you're not going to get 26. It's 25. Go to www.diastronghealth.com. That's www.diastronghealth.com. So what are some warning signs that the honeymoon is over? Like you don't bring flowers anymore? You go right down in the doldrums of the sugars, the salty sugars.
So basically, it's like you're on your honeymoon. Let's take like an actual honeymoon. And then all of a sudden they're like, it's like people coming to tell you like you need to leave. Like, no, your honeymoon's over. Your honeymoon's over. And so your cells are like, we're going to take them down and we're going to kill every last cell there is that produces insulin. And so they basically attack it. And so you'll know it's over because you'll basically just start taking a lot more insulin and you'll see a lot more of a roller coaster, which we call it like a diabetes roller coaster, which just is like high and then low, high and then low. Like it's not going to be as steady.
Boy, could that be frustrating too. I think anybody type 2, I've had that myself. And it's up, it's down, and then you don't know what to do.
Yeah. And it's like you're basically like partial remission, which means like honeymoon phase, you're like, okay, I still need some insulin. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you are out. Like you are on your own. I like to say I'm like my pancreas. Well, technically I am my pancreas. But like
it's a part, it's little Sami.
Yeah, it's true. I'm the pancreas. So it's like you're going to have fewer up and downs during the honeymoon phase. So certain like warning signs or like recognition of like when is it stopping would be, okay, I'm having a lot of highs and lows. It probably means my honeymoon phase is over if it's been around a year or even like a year and a half. It can be sooner too, though, depending when you got diagnosed. Researchers basically found one thing to prolong it in those with type 1. So like ideally it would be great to like prolong the honeymoon phase.
Sure. Like for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's what I try to do in relationships. I'm like, prolong this. I'm kidding.
Stalk them.
I'm like,
there's ways to do
prolong the
that.
honeymoon phase. Always. I like had a kid ask me one time. Well, I guess not a kid. He's like my age.
A kid.
Yeah. I just
a young adult.
I feel like he's way younger than me. And he was like, Sammy, like, how do you know when the honeymoon phase is over? And I legitimately, it did not process in my brain at first that he meant dating. And I was like, well, your body just stops producing insulin. And I was like, oh my God, you met with your girlfriend. I'm so sorry.
Who was a type 0.
I was like, sorry.
Do you have any examples of maybe friends of yours that went through this or any stories?
Yeah. So, side note, the little method is just taking vitamin D3, they said. It can slow the decline, I guess, of like...
It could prolong the...
honeymoon phase, basically. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's worth it. D3 is good anyway.
Taking vitamin D3. But okay, yes, a friend. So I know this girl, I've known her for a long time, and she got diagnosed. And the doctor was like, yeah, you only need to take your 24-hour insulin. And she's telling me this, and I was like, what? You're only taking your 24-hour insulin? Like, what do you mean? And she was like, I don't have to take insulin for food yet. I just have to eat like really low carb. I was like, oh, I think your doctor might be wrong. Because I was just like, wait, I didn't realize the honeymoon phase could be to that extent. Like, geez, that's nice. I didn't get that. They were like, okay, start popping the shotties right when you start eating. Like, so she basically only took 24-hour insulin. And I was like, are you type 2? She's like, no, my pancreas just still works pretty well, but like I have all the signs. And that's what it surprised me because I realized you could have the same symptoms I had or you had when you get diagnosed, but those symptoms, it doesn't mean just because you have the same symptoms that your pancreas is completely done. You might just get those symptoms earlier, but your pancreas is still working somewhat because everybody's sensitive to different blood sugars. So she just now is starting to take her insulin for food. And I'm like, it's been like a year and a half. I'm like,
Boy,
you
that seems like an
lucky
odd
bitch.
turn of events. Does it an odd sequence?
I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, that's so lucky.
And who's your doctor? Frankenstein? I mean, it just seems like
I'm like, okay, aren't we all lucky to have that? Psych, no, we're not. Like, but yeah, that one was an interesting one. Everybody's kind of differs. Like a lot of people I know, they didn't have like that big of a honeymoon phase. I kind of like talking about the honeymoon phase with type 2 because someone would be like, well, that's not the correct definition. But I like for type 2, I think a honeymoon phase could be seen as prediabetes because it's like you are not diabetic yet and you have the option to like turn it around. But I see that a lot. Like I know a lot of people that tell me that they're pre-diabetic. And then they're like, yeah, it's so
I heard about it and I didn't really want to believe it. I'm not pre-diabetic. Well, I just, I'll eat good for a couple of days, couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. But I really didn't look much into it. And my friend's dad lived out of the country, so he went back home. So it's not like I had a doctor to consult. If you're listening and maybe you are pre-diabetic or maybe you haven't been diagnosed at all, look into it because maybe you have a chance to turn it around altogether.
yeah. So it's, I don't know. I think it needs to be a thing. I think we should call it like a T2 honeymoon. Yeah, T2
But I mean,
honeymoon.
mine lasted a pretty long time,
Like T2 honeymoon
at
phase.
least a couple of years.
Yeah, T2 honeymoon
Honeymoon
phase.
in Vegas, honeymoon in, yeah.
Honeymooning. I'm like, yeah.
We'll add it to your list of terms.
Yeah, I just think it's good because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions with diabetes and a lot of things that people don't know. In the honeymoon phase, if you are older and you get diagnosed in your 20s with type 1 or type 2, and you go to the doctor and they just tell you, oh, here's this, do this, and you'll be good. Okay, sure, you have a doctor, they're giving you the insulin, but they don't tell you like what they tell you when you're a kid. Like Children's Hospital told me everything. That nurse, Kylie, was the great. She was like, told me details about the honeymoon phase, when it would last, how long it would last. It was awesome. But it's interesting because it's not the case for a lot of adults that get it. And I think there's definitely been a rise in it in adulthood. There's been a rise in like type 1 and type 2. So I don't know. I just think it's important. Like, I think it's an important conversation. And the honeymoon phase is something that people don't either understand or they take it as, no, this is how it's always going to be. And then they come in a world of shock. And that's where I think diabetes burnout comes in, fear comes in, the thought of why are my blood sugars bad? What am I doing wrong comes in. Then that leads to anxiety. It could lead to diabulimia, like we talked about. It can lead to a variety of things. And so being aware that a honeymoon phase is normal, it'll last for a little bit and then it won't last anymore.
So if somebody's listening right now and they might be newly diagnosed and they're thinking, okay, I think I probably am still in the honeymoon phase, what can they do to take it further? Can they talk to their endo? Should they read something? I mean, hopefully we're turning on some people to something they didn't realize so they can help themselves. It's not going to last forever. You just said that. It's true.
I'm like, enjoy it because it's not going to last forever. And you don't know. There's no warning sign. The doctor can't tell you unless there's a magical way to like test the pancreas cells, like which ones are working. But I don't even know if that's possible. So we're just going to ignore us of that.
As of right now, yes, that's not available.
No, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, maybe in like some trials and stuff, but not that I'm aware of. But yeah, enjoy it and just be aware, like be mindful. And also like, I get it. It's supposed to be, you can eat whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can live life. Don't let diabetes stop you, blah, blah, blah. But exercise and nutrition, like just how a diabetic eats is how everybody should eat. So like, don't just be like, screw this. I'm in the honeymoon phase, which means now I can eat all the muffins and cookies I want to, and my pancreas will make up for it. Like, no, that's not how that works. Sorry.
Well, for type 2s, that's how we got there in the first place. Type 1s might be a little bit different.
Dobie, you got to give yourself some credit, though. It can be genetic, and some people it's in their genes.
Well, it must have been in mine, obviously, because I told you, my siblings don't have it. I do.
Did you enjoy the cookies?
Oh, yeah. I loved every bite of every chocolate chip of every one. No, it is my own fault. And it combined with a lack of exercise too. But because of this show, because of people like you and Elizabeth and our pod squad and Zach and everybody at our team and listeners too, I am the example that's turning my life around. So hopefully people listening as type 2s. And again, sorry to say, life is not fair. There are 9 out of 10 of us are type 2s. Not that type 1s aren't important. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole different
No,
thing.
but
We're
it's the reality.
just strength in numbers.
The diabetic reality.
Yeah.
All right, Dobie, we have some shout outs.
We do have shout outs. We appreciate everybody that listens. So we want to make sure that you know that we know that you're out there. Who do you got,
I have
Sami?
one.
Okay.
I got Emily. She shouted us out on Instagram and said, I've been going back and listening to Just My Type Pod, and this episode is a must. And then she put parentheses, all are really for getting to know what diabetes is. And it's the one about back to basics, episode 19 of diabetes.
I have one. I don't feel like professional wrestling, but I used to be.
It's pretty sick. MMA?
No. This is WWE. MMA is not really professional wrestling. There's a guy called the Texas Hangman. And that's his wrestling name. Why you're the Texas Hangman? Because the Vermont Hangman doesn't sound nearly as threatening and mean. So he started listening with his lovely young lady, and started with the Mother's Day episode and said, my girl and I are going to start listening to all of them from 1 on. We enjoyed the Mother's Day episode. That. So thank you, Texas Hangman.
I love that. I have another one, and her name's Christina, and she shouted us out and said, this is what I can totally relate to. I didn't hide my diabetes when I was 6, and I'm definitely not hiding it now. I am confident. And it was the how to act like a badass.
Oh, that's one of my favorite episodes. Yeah, if you're new, go back and listen to that one.
I love it.
That was
one of my faves. Okay, give me your next one.
I have another. Patrick Lopeman is listening. Said, I've been a type 1 for 30 years. I've never heard the show. With each episode is not only informative, it's fun. And that's that's the biggest compliment anybody could.
Makes me happy.
Spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Spoonful of sugar-free sweetener. I don't know what you want to say.
If you go to Starbucks, you get that sugar-free vanilla.
You get the sugar-free vanilla. But so yes, 30 years I listened, and this is the one that is entertaining and informative. That's our whole plan. So thank you, Patrick Lopeman.
Yep. Amen, sister friend.
You got one more?
Friend. There we go. Actually, yes, I do have another one. Hold on.
While you're looking, I'll say I have got 3 of them. Brendan O'Day is a pre-diabetic. So that was an athlete all through high school. And I am a little bit older now. I have kids. I'm a father. I'm pre-diabetic. And because of your show, I am turning it around by exercise and better diet. So thank you, Brendan.
We love that. I have one. It is from, I don't know if this is how you pronounce it. Sorry, sir. Jafra Yurka. And he said, I just listened to Sami on Instalowan's podcast. I got the best of both works. His and JMT, Just My Type, are my 2 absolute favorites. Keep it up. I always look forward to your guys' next episode.
We appreciate you in every way, shape, and form. Please tell your friends. If you don't like us, tell your enemies. Tell somebody. Diabetes is not going away, even though there is a honeymoon phase. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So we want to be here for you and here for us too. We're a family. We're a group. We're a fraternity, a sorority, all wrapped up into one.
Yeah. Strat life. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you got a question of the pod?
Yes, question of the pod. How long was your honeymoon phase? And please answer that question. How long was your honeymoon phase? Mine was about 1.5 years. Dobie, yours would have technically been pre-diabetes.
So yeah, pre-diabetes. I would say 2 to 3 years, right around there, when I just totally blew it off like an idiot. So if you are in that situation, don't do what I did.
Don't do it. But yes, you can answer the question of the pod. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at JustMyTypePod_, Facebook at JustMyTypePod, and our hashtag JustMyTypePod. And again, answer the question of the pod. But yes, please give us a 5-star rating interview so we can get the diabetes community together and join our conversation.
Special thanks to our pod squad, Queen Elizabeth, our executive producer, who always does a great job. Also, Zach, our intern, who was right there at her side, her co-pilot. So we are a team.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. Sami, put the sugar-free cherry on the healthy Sunday one more time.
Say la vie, baby.
This is the Just My Type podcast.